To understand why Bumpy Johnson showed up at Frank Lucas's apartment at 3 a.m., you need to understand their relationship in 1965. Frank had been working for Bumpy for 13 years. He started as a driver in 1952. Just a kid from North Carolina who needed a job. But Bumpy saw something in Frank. Intelligence, ambition, loyalty. Over the years, Bumpy promoted Frank, made him a bagman, then a collector, then a street captain. By 1965, Frank was managing 3 of Bumpy's heroin operations in Harlem. He was making $2,000 a week. Good money for a street captain. But Frank wanted more. Frank watched other dealers getting rich. Guys like Nicky Barnes pulling in $50,000 a week. Frank was smarter than Nicky, worked harder than Nicky. But Nicky had his own operation. Frank worked for Bumpy. So Frank made a decision. He would skim, just a little, not enough for Bumpy to notice. Frank started in January 1965. He would take $500 here, $1,000 there. He'd adjust the books, hide the discrepancies, make it look like expenses or losses. By March, Frank had stolen $50,000 from Bumpy's operations. And Frank thought he'd gotten away with it. He was wrong. Bumpy knew from day one. Chapter 1. Bumpy's Test. Bumpy Johnson had survived 30 years in Harlem's underworld by being smarter than everyone around him. He didn't survive through violence, though Bumpy could be violent when necessary. He survived through intelligence, through understanding human nature, through testing people. When Frank started skimming in January, Bumpy noticed immediately. Bumpy's accountant, a man named Lewis, brought the discrepancies to Bumpy's attention. Boss, Frank's books don't add up. He's showing losses that don't match the street reports. Bumpy studied the numbers. How much? About $15,000 over the past month. Bumpy closed the ledger. Don't say anything to Frank. Lewis looked confused. You want me to let him steal? I want to see what he does with it. Maybe he's got a good reason. Maybe he's in trouble. Maybe he's just greedy. Let's find out. Over the next 2 months, Bumpy watched Frank carefully. Watched how much Frank took. Watched what Frank did with the money. And Bumpy noticed something interesting. Frank wasn't spending the money on cars, jewelry, or women. He wasn't living flashy. Instead, Frank was saving it, putting it away, building a nest egg. That told Bumpy something important. Frank wasn't stealing because he was greedy or stupid. He was stealing because he was ambitious. He was planning for something, and Bumpy decided to find out what. Chapter 2. The 3 a.m. Visit. March 28, 1965. 3:17 a.m., Bumpy Johnson knocked on Frank Lucas's door. When Frank opened it and saw Bumpy standing there with that briefcase, Frank knew his life was over. But Bumpy didn't pull a gun, didn't threaten violence. He just walked in, set the briefcase on the table, and told Frank to sit. Frank sat. His mind was racing, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain, whether to deny it or confess. Bumpy opened the briefcase, showed Frank the $50,000. This is yours, right? Frank's voice was barely a whisper. Boss, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But first, I want to ask you a question. Why? Frank looked up. What? Why did you steal from me? You've been loyal for 13 years. I've treated you well, paid you fair, promoted you. So why? Frank knew lying wouldn't help. Bumpy already knew the truth. Because I want more, Frank said. More money? More than money. I want what you have. I want respect, power. I want to be somebody. Bumpy nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. And you thought stealing from me was the way to get there? Frank's voice was defensive. I wasn't going to steal forever. I was just building a stake, saving money so I could start my own operation someday, without having to crawl to you asking for permission. Bumpy smiled. But you are crawling. Right now, you're sitting here terrified because I found out. So how is this better? Frank had no answer. Bumpy continued. Let me tell you something about power, Frank. Real power doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from territory or drugs or guns. Real power comes from one thing: trust. Trust? People have to trust you. Your crew, your partners, your bosses. Because the moment they don't trust you, you're finished. Nobody will work with you. Nobody will protect you. You're alone. And in this business, being alone means being dead. Frank understood where this was going. I betrayed your trust. Yes, you did. Bumpy leaned forward. But here's the thing. I've been watching you for 2 months. I wanted to see if you'd come clean on your own. If you'd realize what you were doing was stupid and stop. You didn't. But I also noticed you weren't spending the money. You were saving it. That tells me you weren't stealing because you're greedy. You were stealing because you're ambitious. And ambition, Frank, is something I can work with. Greed gets you killed. But ambition? Ambition makes you useful. Frank didn't know what to say. Bumpy pushed the briefcase across the table. This is your money. You stole it. You keep it. Frank's eyes widened. What? You keep it. Consider it a loan, an investment in your future. But Frank, you're going to pay me back, every penny. With interest. How much interest? 20%. Frank did the math. 20% of $50,000 was $10,000. So Frank would owe Bumpy $60,000 total. That's fair, Frank said. No, Bumpy corrected. That's generous. Because I could have killed you tonight. I could have had my people dump you in the river. But I didn't. You know why? Why? Because you're smart, you're loyal, even when you're being disloyal. You're thinking 3 moves ahead. And those are qualities I need in the person who's going to take over my operation when I'm gone. Frank's heart stopped. What? Bumpy's voice was calm. Frank, I'm 60 years old. I've had 2 heart attacks. I'm not going to live forever. And when I die, Harlem's going to explode. Every dealer, every crew, every boss is going to fight for control. It's going to be chaos, unless I prepare someone, unless I choose a successor and train him, teach him everything I know. So when I'm gone, there's no power vacuum. There's just a smooth transition. You want me to take over? I want you to be ready to take over. But first, you need to learn some things. And lesson 1 is this. You don't steal from the people you want to lead. You earn their trust. You prove you're worthy. And then, when the time comes, they'll follow you because they believe in you, not because they fear you. Frank felt tears in his eyes. He'd thought he was about to die. Instead, Bumpy was offering him everything he'd ever wanted. Bumpy stood up. You've got 1 year to pay me back. $60,000. You do that, you prove you're serious. And then we'll talk about the next steps. Bumpy walked to the door, stopped, turned back. Oh, and Frank, one more thing. Yes, boss? If you ever steal from me again, I won't come to your apartment at 3 a.m. with a briefcase. I'll send someone else. And they won't be bringing money. They'll be bringing a shovel. Understand? Frank nodded. I understand. Good. Bumpy walked out. Chapter 3. The Payback. Frank Lucas spent the next year working harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He managed Bumpy's operations with ruthless efficiency. He expanded territories. He increased profits. He cut costs. And every month, Frank put aside money to pay Bumpy back. By March 1966, exactly 1 year later, Frank had saved $65,000. He'd exceeded the debt by $5,000. He walked into Bumpy's office above Small's Paradise nightclub and placed an envelope on Bumpy's desk. "What's this?" "Your money, plus interest, plus a little extra." Bumpy opened the envelope, counted the cash. He looked at Frank. You paid me back early and with extra. That's good. That shows discipline." "Frank, you've learned the lesson." Frank waited. Bumpy continued. "You thought stealing from me would get you ahead. But all it did was put you in debt. The real way to get ahead, the way I'm teaching you now, is to work smart. Be loyal. Build trust. And when the time comes, take what's yours. Not by stealing, by earning it." Frank nodded. "I understand now." "Good, because I'm about to give you something." "What?" "Your own operation." Bumpy pulled out a folder. Inside were details of a heroin distribution network in East Harlem. 3 corners, 15 dealers. Gross income about $30,000 a week. "This is yours," Bumpy said. "You run it. You keep 80% of the profit. I get 20%. You manage your people. You handle disputes. You make decisions. Consider it your training ground." Frank stared at the folder. This is what he'd been dreaming of for years. "Boss, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything. Just prove I was right to trust you." Chapter 4. The Lesson. 2 years later, in 1968, Bumpy Johnson died of a heart attack. Frank Lucas went to the funeral and put $100,000 in cash on Bumpy's casket. That money, the money that Frank placed in front of 2,000 witnesses, came from the operation Bumpy had given him. Frank had turned that $30,000 a week operation into a $500,000 a week empire. And at the funeral, Frank made his claim. He was Bumpy's successor. He was the new king of Harlem. But Frank never forgot that night in March 1965. The night Bumpy showed up at 3 a.m. with a briefcase full of money. The night Bumpy could have killed Frank, but chose to teach him instead. Years later, after Frank had built his Blue Magic heroin empire and become one of the richest criminals in American history, a reporter asked him about Bumpy Johnson. "What was the most important thing Bumpy taught you?" Frank's answer was immediate. "He taught me that real power comes from trust. You can steal money. You can steal territory. But you can't steal respect. You have to earn it. And the night I thought I was about to die, Bumpy gave me a chance to earn it." "Did you?" Frank smiled. "I paid him back every penny, with interest, and when he died, I made sure everyone knew he was the greatest man I'd ever known. Because Bumpy didn't just teach me how to make money, he taught me how to be somebody." The reporter asked one final question. "If you could go back to that night, would you still steal from Bumpy?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "No. Because I didn't need to steal. I just needed to be patient. Bumpy was already planning to give me everything. But I was too young and too stupid to see it. That's the lesson. Sometimes the best way to get what you want is to stop trying to take it and start earning it." Bumpy Johnson showed up at Frank Lucas's apartment at 3 a.m. with $50,000 in a briefcase. He could have killed Frank. Instead, he taught Frank the most important lesson of Frank's life. Trust is more valuable than money. Loyalty is more powerful than theft. And the people who earn their way to the top last longer than the people who steal their way there. Frank Lucas stole $50,000 from Bumpy Johnson. And in return, Bumpy gave Frank an empire. Because Bumpy understood something Frank didn't understand yet. Real bosses don't punish ambition. They channel it. And that 3 a.m. visit wasn't a threat. It was an investment. An investment that paid off when Frank became the king of Harlem and honored Bumpy's memory by putting $100,000 in his casket. That money was more than respect. It was proof. Proof that Bumpy's lesson had worked. Proof that Frank had learned. Proof that sometimes the best thing a mentor can do isn't punish a mistake. It's teach you why it was a mistake and give you a chance to do better. Bumpy Johnson did that for Frank Lucas, and Frank never forgot it.